Eli Turner believed retirement in Maple Glen would be quiet, until the first letter from the HOA came. The soft creak of the porch swing had become a familiar rhythm in Eli's morning routine. Maple Glen, with its quiet streets and the whisper of wind through golden maple trees, felt like a dream compared to the bustle of his years in uniform. Every morning, Eli would sip his black coffee while watching Maya sketch the neighborhood from the porch, her sketchpad balanced carefully on her lap, the wheels of her chair locked gently into place at the top of the ramp. The ramp itself was simple. Functional. Built with his own two hands and compliant with every ADA regulation he could research. A smooth, sturdy path leading from the front door down to the sidewalk, nothing more than a necessity for his daughter. To Maya, it was more than that. It was independence. She had named it. The slide, she'd whispered with a mischievous smile. Because it lets me glide. That morning, like every other since they moved in late October, began at Gracie's place. The diner buzzed with the clinking of mugs and the low hum of old-timers reliving high school football games. A waitress in her 60s, name tag reading Luann, winked as she set down their usual. Eggs over easy for the sheriff and blueberry pancakes for the artist, she said, placing a tiny carafe of maple syrup just so. Y'all settling in? Eli nodded. One day at a time. Maya beamed at Luann and carefully folded a dollar bill into a triangle before slipping it beneath the rim of her plate. I remembered the tip today. You're a gem, sugar, Luann replied. Got better manners than half the folks born here. Later that morning, while Eli sorted through a pile of mail on the kitchen counter, a crisp white envelope caught his eye. No return address. Just a bold stamp, Maple Glen Property Standards Committee. He opened it slowly. Read. Then read again. Your recently installed ramp does not conform to the aesthetic standards of our community. It disrupts the neighborhood's visual harmony. Kindly remove it within 14 days. Eli stared at the letter, a furrow forming across his brow. Visual harmony, he muttered. The words felt absurd, deliberately vague. He reached for the HOA handbook he'd received during closing. No mention of ramps. No clause against accessibility modifications. Out on the porch, Maya was drawing again. Her colored pencils spread like sunbursts across the little side table. She glanced up as he approached, her expression curious. What's wrong? He hesitated, then handed her the letter. She read silently. Her fingers curled slightly around the page. Are they going to make us take it down? No, Eli said softly. It stays. You stay. Maya nodded slowly, her face unreadable, but her grip on the pencil tightened just a little. Okay. The next few days passed with an undercurrent of unease. Maple Glen, for all its charm, had a way of smiling with one side of its mouth. Mrs. Granger next door always waved and offered up homemade scones, but Eli couldn't help noticing the longer glances from other neighbors, the occasional whispered word as he rolled by with Maya. Then came the afternoon with Judith Ames. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Maya had wheeled herself to the edge of the ramp, sketching the way the light turned leaves to amber. Eli watched from the porch, sipping his second cup of coffee. Across the street, a tall woman in a tailored cardigan and low heels crossed deliberately. Her silver hair was pulled into a perfect twist. She paused at the foot of the ramp, hands clasped loosely in front of her. That slope makes our entrance look sloppy, she said, her voice crisp and sweet like tea left out too long. You'll take it down. For everyone's sake. Eli didn't rise immediately. He set his mug down gently, the ceramic clinking against the arm of the chair. Then he stood, slow and measured, and met her gaze. We'll see. What started as a safety ramp for Maya quickly became a lightning rod for HOA politics. Eli stood at the edge of the porch, eyes scanning the street as the morning sun crept up behind the red rooftops of Maple Glen. The ramp still stood firm and untouched, its gentle slope a quiet defiance. But in the mailbox, a fresh envelope waited, this one stamped in bold red ink across the top. Remove the ramp within 72 hours or the HOA will issue a citation for non-compliance. There was no signature, only Maple Glen Property Standards Committee. But the implication was loud and clear. He didn't need a return address to know where it had come from. Inside, Maya was quiet. Her sketchpad lay untouched on the coffee table, her pencils still tucked in their case. Eli noticed the absence of her humming, the quiet little tune she often sang to herself when drawing. She looked up as he entered, her face tight. "I'm not going to the craft class," she said simply. "What? Why not?" "I can't. They said it's not set up for wheelchairs. Not logistically sound." She shrugged, but Eli saw the flicker behind her calm. Hurt, buried deep. He sat beside her. "You sure that's what they said?" "They told Mrs. Granger. She tried to ask for me." Eli's jaw tightened. "That's not okay." He pulled out the HOA handbook again, flipping through its neatly printed pages. There it was, the clause they kept referencing: all alterations that disrupt the visual continuity of Maple Glen's architectural design may be subject to HOA correction. Visual continuity, he muttered. Whatever that means. He closed the book and grabbed his jacket. "We're going to Gracie's." The diner was more crowded than usual. A banner that read "Thanksgiving pie orders now open" hung across the counter. The smell of cinnamon and roasted pecans filled the air. Luann waved them toward a small booth near the window. As they settled in, a familiar voice called out. "Sheriff Turner." Eli turned to see Deputy Ruiz approaching with a half-drunk mug of coffee in hand. He looked the same as ever, sharp eyes, calm stride. "Didn't expect to see you back in uniform territory," Ruiz said, sliding into the booth behind Eli's. "Retirement treating you all right?" "Trying to," Eli said. "Maple Glen's got its own rules, though." Ruiz raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess, HOA?" Eli nodded. "Yeah, they tried that with me too," Ruiz said. "Back when my boy was little. Built a tree swing. Next week I got a letter, play structures not in line with community standards." He sipped. "It's the same story, different lawn." "What did you do?" "Took it down. Regretted it for weeks. I figured better to keep the peace, but honestly..." Ruiz leaned in a little. "They're overstepping." Just then, the bell over the diner's door jingled. Judith Ames walked in, beige sweater draped perfectly across her shoulders, gold watch glinting as she checked the time. She ordered without sitting, just a coffee to go, and turned, noticing Eli and Maya by the window. Her smile was brief, controlled. Outside, Mr. Keller was raking leaves along the curb. He gave Eli his usual nod as they passed. But this time, he spoke, barely more than a whisper. "Judith's not the law here," he said. "Don't let her pretend to be." That evening, Maya didn't ask to go outside. She didn't even glance at the ramp. Instead, she stayed by the window, watching the kids across the street decorate their porch with straw turkeys and faux pumpkins. Eli noticed her hand gripping the windowsill a little tighter. "What's on your mind, kiddo?" "One of them called me a sidewalk scratcher," she said quietly. "Said I mess up the pavement with my wheels." Eli's heart sank. He followed her gaze to the foot of their driveway, where a new sign had been posted overnight. The same official font. Bold black letters on white paper. Taped to their front gate. Final warning. Violation of Maple Glen visual standards. Immediate correction required. He didn't speak. He simply walked inside, sat at the kitchen table, and opened his laptop. His fingers moved deliberately across the keyboard. Under the ADA, this ramp is lawful and necessary. Consider this my response. Judith didn't just cross a line, she redrew the whole sidewalk to make herself queen. The late autumn sun cast long, golden shadows across Maple Glen Park as Eli pushed Maya's wheelchair along the cracked path. Leaves rustled under the tires, crunching in soft bursts. The girl had asked for this walk, her first since the incident with the note and the term sidewalk scratcher. Her eyes scanned the branches above, their color fading with the season. "Feels like the world's changing too fast," she murmured. Eli gave her a side glance, his smile gentle. "Then we just change at our pace." They turned a corner near the playground, where empty swings swayed in the breeze. That's when they saw her. Judith Ames stood in the middle of the path, arms folded, beige sweater blending into the soft light. Her SUV glinted nearby, parked crookedly at the curb. Her lips curled in a polished smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I suppose this is your weekly demonstration now?" Judith's voice was sugar-dipped in vinegar. Eli kept his step steady. "We're enjoying the park." "That a problem?" "You're damaging the sidewalks." Again. Her hand dipped into her oversized handbag, withdrawing something metallic. At first, Eli thought it might be her phone. But it wasn't. A small handgun. She didn't aim it. She didn't raise her voice. She simply let the weight of it linger in her palm, low and visible. "I'm within my rights," she said softly. "This is a community, and your slope, your daughter's presence, it's disrupting the balance." Maya froze. Eli moved a fraction closer to her, one hand curling around the wheelchair handle, the other subtly drifting toward his pocket. "Put it away," he said, voice calm but immovable. "Right now." Judith's eyes narrowed, flicking from his stance to the small crowd starting to gather near the swing set, parents, a jogger, an elderly couple with leash terriers. One man watched, expression unreadable, then turned his back. Eli didn't move. The autumn wind tugged at his jacket. For one long second, everything stilled. Judith tilted her head. "This is how communities break down, you know. One slope. One rule ignored. One family that thinks they're above. Put it away." Finally, her eyes flicked to his other hand, hovering near his phone. She hesitated. Then, with theatrical slowness, slipped the gun back into her purse. "You've been warned," she said, turning sharply and walking toward her SUV. Tires crunched leaves as she pulled away, taillights glowing like angry eyes. Eli stood still for a moment longer. His shoulders didn't rise, his breath didn't quicken. But his jaw had locked into a familiar shape, a shape Maya hadn't seen in months. She looked up at him. "Dad. We're going home." That night, their house felt unusually quiet. Maya colored in her sketchpad in the living room, music low, the kind of peaceful tune she liked before bed. Eli moved into his study. The walls were lined with books, photos, and mementos from another life. He knelt before the heavy oak cabinet in the corner, spun the dial of the safe, and opened it. A small leather case lay inside. He unzipped it. His badge, gleaming silver and blue, read, Sheriff Eli Turner, County of Rowan. He held it in his palm for a long moment, eyes fixed, breath steady. This was no longer just about a ramp. This was about the law, and who thought they stood above it. The town didn't know Eli was law, until he quietly reminded them. November had folded its colors into bare branches. The wind was crisper now, brushing Maple Glen's porches with a bite that made lights flicker earlier in the day. Thanksgiving banners hung across mailboxes, and soft golden bulbs winked from rooflines like cautious hopes. Inside the Turner house, silence was focused. Eli sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, his eyes fixed on the blinking cursor. Beside him lay a neat manila folder, photos of the ramp, HOA letters, and a printout of the ADA Title III clause. Maya sat nearby, coloring a Thanksgiving turkey with watercolor pencils, her scarf tied gently around her neck. It had belonged to her mother, cream cotton with small forget-me-nots stitched near the hem. "Think it'll help?" she asked quietly, not looking up. "I think it needs to exist," Eli replied. "Sometimes that's enough to start." He attached the final document and clicked send. Later that afternoon, Deputy Ruiz stopped by. His cruiser hummed in the driveway as he walked up the ramp with practiced ease. "Just checking in," he said. "Mind if I step in?" They sat on the porch. Ruiz accepted a coffee but didn't sip it. My boy, Daniel, used to have a treehouse, he started. It wasn't fancy, just scrap wood and paint, but he built it with his own hands. HOA said it interfered with property lines. Made us tear it down. Eli said nothing, but his jaw tightened slightly. Thought about that when I saw your ramp. Different shape. Same overreach. Judith's not new to this, is she? Ruiz shrugged. She knows how to push without quite breaking rules. And folks here, well, they fold easy when she smiles. That evening, an envelope slipped under the Turner front door. White, unmarked, but the typeface was unmistakable, Judith. Emergency HOA meeting, November 20th, 6 p.m., Town Hall. She's escalating, Eli said. Maya looked up. Will you go? I have to. The town hall next to the church smelled faintly of old varnish and coffee left too long on the burner. The folding chairs were nearly full when Eli arrived, a few heads turning his way. He wore a clean flannel shirt and jeans. No uniform. Judith stood at the front, wrapped in a beige knit that matched the polish on her nails. Her gold watch gleamed as she adjusted the microphone. We are here to address a pressing concern, one that threatens both safety and aesthetic unity. Eyes flicked between her and Eli. She began a long speech about community standards, slipping in phrases like harmonious environment and visual intrusions. A slideshow flickered behind her. One photo featured the Turner home, the ramp framed as if it were a threat. Eli stood quietly when she finished. He walked to the front, unfolded a printed copy of the ADA clause and set it beside the projector. Under ADA Title III, the ramp is lawful. I suggest you read up. A few gasps rustled through the audience. Judith stepped forward, voice tight. Are you suggesting we're discriminating, Mr. Turner? I'm saying you're mistaken, he said simply. Then, from inside his jacket, he pulled a badge. Silver, worn at the edges, but unmistakable. Sheriff Eli Turner, Green Hills County, retired. But I still know how to recognize an abuse of power. A hush fell over the room. Judith's mouth opened, then closed. Without another word, she gathered her notes and exited down the aisle, heels clicking faster than usual. Silence lingered, broken only when someone shifted in a chair. As Eli turned to leave, a woman approached. Her coat was dark blue, hair in a tight twist, clipboard under one arm. You don't remember me, do you? She said with a smile. Eli paused, brow furrowing. April Yoon. ADA's office. Maple Glen's Thanksgiving table had more tension than turkey. Eli Turner adjusted the tray of golden brown cornbread as Maya followed behind, carefully balancing a foil-covered pie dish on her lap. The smell of roasted meats, cinnamon, and gravy drifted through the doors of the community hall. Outside, porch lights blinked in sequence, families arriving with covered dishes and warm greetings. But Eli felt the weight of eyes, some warm, others wary. Inside, the long tables were covered in checkered cloths, each square anchored with a platter, bowl, or pitcher. A small sign read, Maple Glen Thanksgiving Potluck, Welcome Home. Careful now, Eli murmured, steadying Maya's wheelchair as they made their way toward the far end. Thanks, Dad. I made sure the crust didn't burn this time, Maya said, cheeks rosy with pride. April Yoon greeted them with a polite smile. You must be Maya. That smells like pumpkin pie. Maya nodded, with extra nutmeg. Eli shook April's hand. Didn't expect to see you here. I blend better in flannel than in a courthouse, she said dryly. Deputy Ruiz emerged from the cluster of chairs near the bingo table, holding a paper plate stacked with turkey slices and green bean casserole. Eli. Didn't peg you for a cornbread man. Family recipe. Goes back 3 generations, Eli said, cracking a grin. Ruiz leaned in. April was just telling me HOA may have breached 3 sections of the North Carolina Association guidelines. She's good. April nodded. Their charter doesn't give them the right to regulate ADA-compliant structures. And there's no transparency in how they allocate fines. Eli's eyes flicked toward the middle of the room. Judith Ames stood tall in a beige knit sweater, gesturing to a group of older residents as if conducting a silent symphony. The red ribbon on her blouse matched the wine in her glass. This town used to have standards. Judith's voice carried just enough to be heard by a few tables around her. Now, it's all about bending the rules for personal comfort. Mr. Keller, sitting beside Maya, leaned forward. I haven't seen this town stand up since '82. Maybe it's time again. Eli smiled at that, his eyes following Maya as she rolled over to a group of kids seated cross-legged on the floor near the faux fireplace display. My dad built the ramp for me, Maya said softly to them. It's safe, and it helps me get to school and the diner and everywhere. One of the kids, a freckled boy named Drew, asked, but didn't the HOA say it's wrong? Dad showed me the law, Maya replied. They're not allowed to take it down. A few of the children looked uncertain, but one girl whispered, that's actually kind of cool. Ruiz nudged Eli with his elbow. That girl of yours is planting seeds. Across the room, Judith's gaze fixed on the group of children. Her smile vanished. She excused herself and walked briskly toward the exit. April stepped beside Eli. She won't back down. No, Eli said. But neither will we. Out in the hallway, Judith pulled out her phone, voice hushed but clipped. He thinks he can win. Bring the form. We'll file formal notice to fine. Behind her, inside the warmth of the hall, laughter rose as someone called out the next bingo number. Maya's pie had disappeared within 10 minutes. And under the soft lights, Eli felt, for the first time in weeks, a fragile but growing shift in the air. When HOA fines turned personal, Eli turned strategic. The envelope came on a gray morning, just as the first hints of frost etched delicate filigree across the window panes. Eli found it wedged beneath the front door, heavier than usual. No postage. Just an emblem, Maple Glen Homeowners Association. Inside, the paper trembled with legal-sounding words, but one line stood stark. You are hereby fined $2,400 for unauthorized structural alterations and visual disruption. Eli sat on the couch, reading the fine again under the soft hum of the television. A rerun from the '70s played, a sitcom family gathering in a small-town kitchen, laughter warming the room. Maya, curled beside him, still wore her pajamas and clutched a blanket tight around her. Dad? Her voice was quiet. Are we in trouble? He set the paper down, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Not even close. But, what if we can't pay? Will we have to move? Her eyes were wide now, worried. He shook his head. Sweetheart, this house is ours. And so is that ramp. We're not going anywhere. But Maya wasn't easily convinced. Later that day, she wheeled into the living room with something clutched in her lap. A sheet of paper, colored with thick crayon strokes, their porch, drawn in warm golds and browns. The ramp stretched out like a bridge. Across the top she had written, Our home, our ramp. Eli placed it in a frame, set it on the mantel. That evening, April knocked, wind tugging at her coat. Got your note, she said, lifting a copy of the HOA citation. They're bluffing, she added, scanning the language. Nothing in the charter grants them this power. Show me the original document. I'll tear it apart line by line. Eli nodded, already moving to the old file cabinet in the back hallway. Years of tax returns, utility bills, and a dusty envelope marked Carolyn Turner, Estate. Inside, folded legal papers, handwritten notes, and something unexpected, a plat map. He spread it on the table. This, he said, pointing to a shaded lot directly across from their house, used to belong to my wife's mother. But it was never transferred. April peered over his shoulder. That's the community garden. Run by the HOA, Eli said. She straightened. Without formal access rights? Eli dialed the county land office. A voice answered, pleasant and crisp. He gave the parcel number. A pause. Then, sir, that property is still privately titled. We have no record of transfer. He hung up slowly, hands resting on the table's edge. If this is correct, Eli murmured, eyes tracing the lines again, their main path isn't even theirs. April looked at him, her expression shifting from curiosity to resolve. Eli picked up his phone once more. Let's talk about legal notice. One letter. One signature. And HOA's power began to crumble. The letter was printed on plain white paper, but its words held the weight of stone. Eli sealed it carefully in a manila envelope, the ink barely dry. It wasn't grand or dramatic, just the truth, firm and concise. To the Maple Glen Homeowners Association, it began. Effective immediately, you are to cease all use of Parcel 12B under Title 47, Property Code, as no legal transfer has been filed. Any further activity may result in formal litigation. He slid it into the HOA mailbox himself, the December air crisp and sharp. Frost clung to porch railings, and lights blinked lazily from the eaves. Maple Glen had donned its Christmas colors, red ribbons, plastic reindeer, icicle lights dangling like tears. Inside, April leaned over the dining table, marking up a second letter. Add this, she said. Cease and desist under private property law, and a formal request for financial audit. Let's see how clean their books are. Maya, from the couch, folded small copies of the legal letter, tucking them into envelopes. How many more, Dad? Just a few, Eli replied, handing her the final stack. Only the ones who need to know. That evening, she visited porches quietly, smiling at the neighbors who peeked out. No one slammed doors. Some nodded. Mr. and Mrs. Halvorsen, who hadn't left their homes since last spring, took the letter and whispered, "Thank you." Friday brought a hastily called HOA meeting. The room next to the church was packed. Fold-out chairs scraped against the linoleum. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. Judith stood at the front, her beige sweater immaculate, her gold watch catching every glint. This, she said, waving Eli's letter, is how a man tears down a community. With threats. With petty grievances. With lawsuits. Eli didn't flinch. Neither did April, seated beside him, nor Ruiz, who had his deputy's badge tucked subtly beneath his coat. Ruiz cleared his throat. I have here, he said, holding up a single page, a petition to call for new HOA elections. Signatures are already coming in. Judith's mouth fell open, but before she could retort, Mr. Keller shuffled forward. In his hands was an old leather-bound photo album. He opened it gently on the table, pointing to a sepia photo from 1975, a small wooden sign labeled Yardley Lot, a girl in braids standing beside it. That's Carolyn Turner, he said softly. Your wife's mother. That garden's been hers since before any of us moved in. Silence held the room like snow weighing down pine boughs. Then Judith snapped. This town owes me everything, she cried, slamming her hand against the table. I've built order. Tradition. You think one letter, one ramp, can undo that? No one answered. No one needed to. Then, from the second row, an old man's voice rose. We owe you nothing. Judith's face drained of color. She stood still for a moment, then turned sharply, her boots striking against the floor like brittle ice. She walked through the double doors without a word. Outside, the snow had begun to fall, fine and steady. It clung to her shoulders, her hair, her SUV's windshield. She didn't brush it away. Inside, the hall filled with soft murmurs. Maya helped string lights with Mr. Keller near the window. A string of golden bulbs blinked slowly to life. Silent, warm. Together. The doors swung shut behind Judith. The light faded from her face as it slipped beneath the storm clouds. And the room remained bright without her. In a town once ruled by silence and HOA letters, it took a single ramp, and a father's quiet resolve, to shift the winds. As lights twinkled over Maple Glen, neighbors found their voice, and rules once wielded as weapons were replaced by understanding. When rules serve people, communities grow stronger. But when power hides behind policy, it's courage and unity that light the path forward. Perhaps it's never too late to speak up for what's right, or to build a ramp that leads not just to a porch, but to hope. Like a lantern hung on a snowy night, one act of kindness can warm an entire town.